Here's what nobody tells you about AI in the enterprise today. It doesn't arrive like a wave. It arrives like a slow drip. And most people don't notice until the water is at their ankles. Mamoon Chowdry, a good friend of mine, he has a front row seat to that drip. He's the director of AI transformation at GE Healthcare. He watches what actually happens when one of the world's biggest companies tries to implement AI at scale. What's working, what stalls, who thrives, and who's getting left behind. Today, we find out what he sees and what it means for every founder and professional trying to figure out where they stand. Let's go. All right, Mamoon, welcome to Return on Reputation. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this a lot, and so for a while. And I initially, what made me think of you as a guest, and we're friends and we live in the same town, so that beyond all that is what you're writing on LinkedIn publicly, and then combined with your unique expertise and the seat you sit in and have sat in for many years at various enterprises. Right now, you've been at Amazon working with them within AI, helping enterprises on board with AI. And then most recently, you've just moved over to GE Healthcare, helping them with AI. And then you've addressed publicly the question of, can AI replace you at work? And one of your posts really hit me. It was like, use AI because if you're using it the right way, it's not cheating. It's amplifying your current expertise and the work you're already doing. And you've seen people put out the best work of their lives with it. So I want to get into all that. I think our audience really cares about all these topics. I think it's top of mind for everyone right now. But I just turn over the mic to you. Before we get into all of that, tell everyone who you are, what you're doing right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Justin. This is an absolute delight when you reached out to me, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm very grateful and touched that you would want to explore these topics, and I'm happy to share as much experience as I can. I want to start out by saying that, first of all, the opinions and observations that I share with you today are really my own. They come from my experience working across the industry and represent no one organization
Yeah,
in particular. But maybe I should share with you a little bit of the journey that I'm on. I
please.
worked across industry. I've worked in a number of different areas, and I've seen a lot of technology shifts. I've seen a lot of companies and people have to adjust to new kinds of technology in very short periods of time. And what has really kind of stood out to me is the success, the return on an investment, the impact that technology delivers is really about 30% of it is in the technology layer and about 70% of it is in the human layer. How we as organizations, as teams, and as individuals organize ourselves around new technologies and how we define the work that should get done and how we do that work as well. And I think in the AI era, that is changing more rapidly than I've ever seen before. And so the reason I started writing on LinkedIn is really to share my observations on the ground.
Hmm.
It's really to, and I say very publicly, look, I'm also learning, but I want to learn in public and I want to see what happens. And a lot of the stories that I come across and a lot of the things that people tell me are not really related to the technology. They're related to our relationship to the technology. And that's what drives an organization's success. That's what drives a team's success. And I think that's what drives our own individual success now in our own careers. And I'll be delighted to kind of deep dive into that more.
Yes, that's really interesting. The you say it's 30% tech and
Hmm.
70% human, and then how we're using that or understanding what work really needs to be done.
Yeah.
And I think that I just heard someone discuss, Elon Musk's philosophy of like simplifying things down to exactly what is needed before then building on top of that. And it sounds like maybe that's what you're saying as well. So I definitely want to get into this. What is day to day? Like, what are you working on? And
it's
probably that's a big question.
an awful lot. So let me start at the high level. So I work at a healthcare company that produces medical devices. At the end of the day, everything that we build ends up in a hospital. It could be a monitor watching a patient at 3 o'clock in the morning. It could
Oh,
be
wow.
an ultrasound helping a clinician make a decision that can really impact a person's life. And so an AI algorithm may be used to flag something that a human eye might miss. The technology that I'm helping engineers build touches over 1 billion patient procedures a year across 160 countries. And that's the
Wow.
context that I wake up with every morning. The stakes aren't purely revenue, the stakes are patient outcomes. So, specifically in my role, my job is to make sure that about a few thousand engineers, I'd say just under 3,000 engineers, are building those products.
Mm.
And that as they build those products, they have every AI advantage available to them. Because when they work faster and when they work smarter, the clinicians, the healthcare providers, they get better tools sooner and patients get better care. And I really think about it in three parts. So this is what I do on a day-to-day basis. It's one, raising the AI capability and maturity of our engineering teams.
Okay.
Two is kind of building the tooling and the communities and removing blockers out of their way so they can use AI with their data, with their requirements, with their specifications, with their code bases, so they can use AI in their daily work. And then to transform really how we develop products so that
Mm.
AI is woven into every step of our R&D process. So, the company that I work for has more AI-enabled medical devices approved by the FDA than any other company. And they're serving doctors and nurses every single day. And my job is really to make sure that the teams building those devices have the same AI advantage in how they work on a day-to-day basis.
Mm, mhm.
On the ground, it
It's
means I
amazing.
spend more time listening than talking. I sit with engineering teams and I ask them to show me how they actually design and build these amazing devices. And then I help them find better ways of working that enables them to really operate at the level they should be operating at. And that's really key because one thing that I found fairly consistently across every area of industry, every organization, and indeed in almost every team, is that we have very highly skilled people who have spent years kind of getting to the pinnacle of their careers. And they spend
Mhm.
a lot of their time doing things that are really, they shouldn't be doing. And it's really an inefficient use of their time and their skills and their energy. So I really think about the engineer in the field who's building these amazing devices and helping them operate at the level that they want to be operating at. And by the way, that's a direct quote from an engineer that I
Mm.
helped, and I can talk about that story a lot more. So the real story is not in the dashboards, it's in the gap between what people think is happening or going to happen when they purchase AI and what
Mhm.
actually happens on the ground. And that's where my job lives.
Oh my god, that's incredible. There's so many questions floating in my head right now, and I don't know which one to start with. But and I think just relating to that, when I first turned it on, 2022, like chat had just
Yeah,
come out, and I'm
yeah,
like, oh my god, let's get in front of this. And I quickly learned, and I think a lot of people are still learning this because I think we're also very early in
indeed.
the big AI wave, and there's no doubt it is the next wave. But
Yeah,
um, it didn't work. Right? It wasn't that impressive out of the box,
yeah,
and there's so much you start quickly learning about,
yeah,
adding context to it, like what is good. And I've always said, and I still think that this is true for most people, but and I'm probably using AI wrong, right? I'll just say that. And you, so please correct me, but I've called this AI human sandwich because it's
yeah,
human prompting upfront strategy,
mm,
context of what is good and what is bad
yeah,
upfront,
yeah,
and then the AI does the grunt work or the busy work,
yeah,
expedites things, and then someone has to come in and polish to make sure it looks good, it actually is correct. And
yeah,
I think that's maybe the last part is decreasing over time. And it sounds like you are on the ground
Yeah.
making sure it's efficient because
Yeah.
I just pulled the stat. So, like 50% of US employees are now using AI at work,
Mm.
which is up 21% from 2 years ago. But most organizations say they're still in the early pilot phases, with only 1% of leaders considering their AI use is mature.
Yeah.
And I think there's other stats of we haven't seen any productivity gains at large, so I'll just stop there and let you comment on that
Yeah.
because
Yeah. You touch on so many important topics that are really at the crux of AI adoption. And not just AI adoption at the individual level, but the organizational level as well. So let's kind of parse some of these things out
yeah,
because it's a wonderful question. There's just so much in it.
there's a lot.
We spend the rest of this time talking about just that one question, all the things that you touched on.
I know this
Uh,
could be like a 5-hour show. I know.
I've seen this movie play out a lot, right?
Yeah.
You come up with a brilliant technology and you end up with really mediocre adoption. Or
Yeah.
you come up with a brilliant technology, a company buys the tool and they announce a transformation, and 6 months later, you have really mediocre results.
Hmm.
The technology was not always the problem. The real opportunity, I think, is in the human layer. And I find that way more interesting than the technology. Let me give you a picture that I think really gets to the crux of the organizational aspect of what
Hmm.
you're asking about there.
Okay.
Before I was in this role, I was recently doing a workshop with a bunch of C-suite leaders. And I asked them, raise your hand if you or your organizations are using AI on a daily basis. And everybody put their hand up
Mm.
without exception. And as their hands were in the air, I asked them, keep your hand up if you have the data to show that your team's use of AI is delivering measurable business outcomes.
Hmm.
Do you have the evidence to show that AI is actually moving the needle in your business?
Hmm.
Every hand came down, every single one. And that's the gap. That's
Yeah.
the entire AI story, I think, in
Yeah.
two questions. Now, your listeners, they can try this tomorrow, right? They can ask their team, they can ask their organizations two questions. Are we using AI and can we prove it's working? And the distance between those two answers is where all the real work lives.
Right.
And I've really kind of dedicated my career now to kind of closing that gap. AI doesn't arrive like a wave. In actuality, it arrives a little bit like a slow drip. And most
Mm.
people don't notice until the water is at their ankles. I was at a workshop recently, and I asked everybody to anonymously rate how comfortable they are with AI on a scale of 1 to 10. And when people were anonymous, they were like, "Oh, maybe it's a 3 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10." And then when I asked the same question later on in the day out loud, it jumped to a 7. And
Oh, interesting.
I think that's another aspect of the problem is that I see a lot of people kind of performing confidence,
Uh,
that they don't have, and I think it's often I see organizational cultures that make it unsafe to be honest. So when I wrote that permission slip article, for example, I want people to feel comfortable saying, "I don't know. I'm behind the curve. I need to catch up. I may be a senior engineer. I should be able to talk to a junior one and ask them, hey, how did you do this thing with AI?"
totally.
So part of it is one driving a data-driven culture to ensure that you're applying AI in the right places where it actually moves the needle for your business.
Yep.
Another part of it is in the human aspect, allowing your team to have a culture of experimentation. And when you have a culture of experimentation, sometimes those experiments fail. If they don't fail, they were never experiments. So you have to make it okay to fail. You have to make it
Yep.
okay for people to try new things with AI, see what works, iterate on the things that don't work, and scale the things that do. That is absolutely critical to how businesses adopt AI in their organization.
Absolutely. I think I spend half my day failing with AI and just tinkering every day. So
Yeah, yeah, and that's
I get
good,
that.
right?
Yeah.
That's good. That's experiments. You're doing experiments. Look, I can come in as a consultant and I can tell you people are doing this with AI and they're doing that with AI, and here are the top 3 things that you should try today, and here are the tools that you should be buying. But ultimately,
Hmm.
the real success arrives when you put the right tools in front of the people doing the work. You give them access to their own data in those tools. And yes, you give them the room to explore, the safety to experiment with the appropriate guardrails. And then you give them the freedom to kind of redesign how they work.
Yeah, that
Find in organizations that do this really well is people begin redefining their own roles. We
yes, yes.
find that people delegate the most tedious, laborious, repetitive parts of their job to AI, and they operate at the level that they want to operate at. And I'll give you an example. And this happened in February this year.
Okay.
I was doing a workshop with a bunch of engineers who were not software engineers. They weren't developers.
Hmm.
And so they were used to kind of looking at data in spreadsheets and writing reports about them, and and they were going cross-eyed comparing data in different columns. And the night before I got there, one engineer said, "You know what? I think I'm going to learn how to code because I never really had to code seriously because I just can't figure out. There has to be a better way to do this problem."
Right.
So I put it in front of an AI tool and I said, "Why don't you describe the problem that you're working with the way you're describing it to me?" And so she did. And she spent about an hour. And we sat down in front of a chatbot and we described the data that she had. By the way, this was, this was temperature sensor data in maternal infant care incubators for babies that were born early. So a really critical patient problem where you need to have very high degree of monitoring and patient safety,
Hmm.
and they had to kind of qualify that the temperature sensors were accurate and they weren't going to fail. And so she had reams and reams of data and she was going cross-eyed looking at it. Within an hour, she had used AI, she had explained the problem. So she'd explained what good did. And exactly in that human sandwich model that you described,
Hmm.
on the front end, she explained what she needed and what success looks like. AI built the workflow for her. It did the analysis for her without her having to write a line of software. And then it produced a PDF report. And she looked at the results and she said, "Oh, this is good, but you need to do this analysis and you need to look at these competitive offerings and you need to look at this kind of temperature gradient and maybe plot some charts over here."
Yeah.
And what happened in real time is that she'd gone from going cross-eyed looking at all of these columns in a spreadsheet to actually sitting back and applying her engineering expertise to the final output. And she was starting to collaborate with the AI and let the AI do the tedious and laborious work. Me. And she came up with this report in an hour that was just amazing. It was everything that she wanted. It was in her mind's eye. This is what she'd have been envisioning. She just didn't know how to get there. And she said to me at the end, "I finally feel like I can operate at the level I should have been operating at all along."
Wow.
And I
Wow.
think that is the model I would bring to everybody. You don't have to be an engineer. If you are any kind of knowledge worker, this is the goal I think you should be aiming towards. Look at your day to day. All right. I wrote about this recently. Every knowledge worker really does two jobs.
Hmm.
There is the execution part of your job, the writing the emails, planning meetings, recording meeting notes and analyzing them, deciding writing a report, producing a set of requirements. And then there is the judgment part of your job.
Right. Right.
And the judgment part is knowing which email to send, knowing which presentation to write, knowing, what requirements a customer of yours really needs,
Sure.
and differentiating that from what your customer told you. That's the judgment part. And I tell everybody, sit back and look at your average day to day.
Hmm.
If
Yep.
you find that most of your day is focused on execution, well, this is your time to adjust
Yes.
because
Yeah.
AI does execution really fast. You can't write emails faster than AI. You can't write code faster than AI. You
Yep.
can't build presentations faster than AI. But what AI can't do is understand your customer. It can't
Right.
tell you, for this particular customer, here's the way you should be structuring this proposal. It can't tell you, for this particular situation, this is the business acumen that you should be applying. Sure, it could mentor you in general terms, but it
Yep.
doesn't have the life experience and the career experience that you have.
Totally.
If your day to day is focused on judgment, then congratulations, you are really well placed
Mm.
to not just survive, but excel in this AI era. Because here's what I tell everybody. And if you take nothing else away from this, take this. Anybody can use the same AI tool that you use. Even if you're in 100,000 person organization, whatever AI tool you purchase, your competitor can download and provision the same AI tool in about 45 minutes,
Hmm.
making it available to their entire workforce. That is not the differentiator, right? Whether you use one chatbot or another chatbot doesn't make any difference. They're all incredibly capable these days. This
Okay.
is where the difference comes in. When you take AI and you apply your judgment and you apply your experience, that is where um, that is how you differentiate yourselves as individuals
Interesting.
and as entire organizations, because nobody can replicate that combination. If
Yes.
you can figure out how to collaborate with AI, how to get the best out of AI in your day to day, apply your judgment and your experience that you've been building up over your entire career, then nobody can replicate that. And that is how people differentiate themselves.
Yeah, yeah, you just said no one can replicate that. That's yeah, I agree. I think that also, let's just transition here and ask the big question, the elephant in the room for a lot of people listening, will AI replace me? Because I think you're kind of going there anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or what you just said kind of hints at that. Because a lot of people, especially, yeah, I would say 5 years ago, everyone predicted that blue collar workers, truck drivers would be replaced right away, all
Yeah.
this stuff.
Yeah.
Now the talk is, white collar knowledge workers are being like basically targeted right now. Like,
Yeah.
will there be lawyers in 2
Mm.
years? I don't even know. I think what you're saying, well, what do you think? What is the answer to that right now? In your opinion, being on the ground, seeing this, does
Yeah.
it replace workers or do just people transform how they work?
Yeah.
And
I
will it
think
grow the economy?
yeah. So look, I think it's more of a ladder, right?
Yeah.
I don't think AI is going to make the entire workforce obsolete. I think it is going to make certain skills or certain abilities less valuable. And we're
Mm,
seeing right now the market is repricing certain skills and certain experience in real time. For example, in software development, we're finding that the hiring market is very hard for new computer science graduates who are just starting to enter the workforce and
mm,
want to become junior developers. We're finding it's very hard for them. I think there'll always be a role for junior developers, and they're critical to our talent pipeline. But let me just kind of step back for a second
yeah.
and get to the crux of your question. I was sitting with a marketing director a little while ago, and they were telling me, hey, look, they were really having an existential crisis.
Yeah.
They said, look, ChatGPT does in 30 seconds what takes me 3 hours. It comes up with 50 different marketing slogans for a particular campaign, and
Yeah.
a lot of them are fairly mediocre, but some of them are really good. And what is the point of me? I always thought that I was a creative person, and now the machine is coming up with things that's more creative than I could have thought of. And
Mhm.
so I asked her one question. I said, when the AI writes something terrible, how do you know? How do you tell the difference? And she spent 20 minutes explaining to me how All of the different nuances are coming up with a good marketing slogan. You can't be tone deaf to the brand. You have to kind of pick up on the legal nuances. You don't want to alienate particular key customer segments. And these are things that are not really written down anywhere. Uh,
Right.
there were just things, there were
Sure.
just experts
Expertise.
you kind of picked up along the way. They
Hmm.
weren't really taught in a classroom. They weren't even taught in an onboarding guide, but from decades of experience, you kind of pick these things up. And that came from years and years of watching different marketing campaigns succeed and fail. And at the
Yeah.
end of that explanation, I told her, this is why you are irreplaceable.
Right.
This is why there are certain skills that the AI actually makes more valuable. I talked about how everybody does two jobs. There's the execution, the writing, the drafting, the analyzing, and so forth.
Yeah.
But judgment, knowing which report actually matters, knowing how to serve a particular client, and giving them not necessarily always what they ask for, but what they need. AI is very good at the first job, but doing the second job is surprisingly bad at, I'm finding. So,
Completely. I agree.
yeah. So here's the thing. I think execution was the skill of the last 20 years, right? For the last couple of decades, it was good enough to be competent at a job. But I think the skill of the next 20 years is judgment.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Knowing which work to do and how to do that work. And I think that is how I think people should be thinking about their careers. You may be very good at doing a particular task, but are you very good at knowing what task should be done and how it should be done, or coming up with new ways of doing a particular thing or serving a particular customer? I
Yeah.
think that's the skill set that AI actually makes more valuable. Once you figure that out, you can bring AI in and help you go faster and do and scale and so forth. But that judgment, I think, is going to be absolutely key moving forward.
How do we actually, a mutual friend of ours, he's a consultant, and
Mhm.
I won't mention his name. I haven't talked to him and asked him about permission on this, but he's a consultant for a large consulting firm in the United States. And he told me once last summer, he's like, I tell my people all the time, think more, think more. Right. And I think this is what AI is going to allow most people to do, because so many people are in the weeds with everything you said. But now it allows them to take a step back and strategically look at what really needs to be done, how to discern between what is, good for the customer and bad. So I just wanted to highlight that. I think you're spot on there. The the other piece is, so I guess getting into the weeds, more tactical stuff. I have to ask right away, what is your preferred tool right now? Is it, just on the big platforms, or something I'm missing? Are you into Gemini, Claude, Chat? What do you prefer right now?
I'm not particularly um, aligned with one tool or
Okay.
another.
Okay.
I've experimented with Claude Cowork, for example, the Anthropic models, the Gemini models, the OpenAI models. I've experimented with ChatGPT. Right now, I'm using something from Amazon called Amazon Kiro,
Okay.
which is normally used for software development, and you can use it with a bunch of different models. But more than an individual tool, there is a new kind of paradigm I see emerging since last fall, which I think is really important. And it really describes a type of tool,
Hmm.
which is more than a chatbot. And this is how I configure these tools today. You may have heard of the term an agentic operating system.
Yes. Yeah.
And essentially, what that means, it's much more than a chatbot. It is a
An agent.
desktop, right, where you have agents that maybe have read-only access to your email and your calendar, and they do tasks for you. I have chatbots that are running in the background, and they're kind of separate from the tool that I use. In fact, most tools you can kind of begin to do this now, which are kind of working on my behalf and helping me be more effective in my role,
Yes.
both personally and professionally. For example, I have an agent that in the background is monitoring the meetings that I have, the notes that I take, the questions that I ask. And it's just doing research. It will just say, "Hey, Mamoon,
Mm,
yesterday you were deep diving into FDA compliance for ECG devices. Well, I did some research here, and here's kind of all of the top 10 things you need to know about." And the
interesting.
interesting thing is, it will actually go sideways. So I've given it permission to actually broaden my horizon. So I'll say,
That's cool.
I want you to research 3 things about the things that I was working on yesterday, but I also want you to research 2 things that you think may be interesting to me, and it will go sideways as well. So,
Wow.
for example, I just offhand, I mentioned in a meeting a while back that I was traveling a lot more these days, and I was looking forward to coming home and seeing my kids. And in the notes, my agent saw this and then actually went and did some research on the impact of a parent traveling and what that does to your children. And it highlighted something. And I thought this was so interesting. I actually wrote about it on LinkedIn. It said that the biggest impact on children is not having a parent that travels an awful lot, but it's having a parent that travels and then being uncertain about when they're going to return. That was really eye-opening for
Mm,
me. I would never have known that if it didn't have this agent kind of working in the background saying, "Hey, Mamoon, maybe this could be interesting to you."
yeah.
And so it actually kind of horizontally kind of expanded my horizons an awful lot.
It's
So
like a high level executive assistant helping you
indeed,
out.
indeed. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
amazing.
It's like having an Ivy League kinda MBA grad or an army of them in your corner, and,
Yeah.
it's really kind of helped me develop as a person, as a father, as a husband, and as a working professional too. So I
Incredible.
would say to every one of your listeners, all of these tools are great and they're moving at fantastic pace, and what's great now, maybe even better in 3 months' time. But think about how you apply the tool in your daily life. I use
Mhm.
it in my personal life. I use it as a relationship coach. I use it as a personal mentor. I use it to kind of bounce ideas when I just want to have a weekend project and play with something. And I use it in my day to day life as well. It's the mentor, it's the coach that never gets tired. It never
Yeah.
gets irritated, no matter how many questions you ask it. And it can really be a collaborator that's in your corner. And that's so much more different than the original kind of chat GPT use case or the Claude use case that came out when all of these, agents started coming out and we put chat GPT on our iPhones and we would ask it for recipes and the weather and all of that
Yeah.
with a limerick,
Yeah.
right? Uh, a funny poem, but there's so much more that you can do with it. Obviously, you put the guardrails around it. Like I don't give it permission to write emails on my behalf. I don't give it permission to do anything that's sensitive. I give it read-only access to a lot of things in my life. But
Okay.
within those guardrails, I absolutely use it. And I think this is the number one skill. The tool is one part of the question. And forgive me, maybe I'm going on a tangent here, but
That's great.
it's so fundamentally important. Whatever tool you use, you must use it to the point of abusing it. And what I mean by that is ChatGPT, Anthropic, Claude, Gemini. These are more than just tools. I think of a hammer as a tool. The flow of communication is one way, right? I use it to hit a nail, and that's all it does, and I control it with my hand.
Yeah.
But in the history of humankind, we've now suddenly got a tool that will talk back to you. It will explain to you
Collaborate with.
use
Yeah.
it. Right. It will mentor you, it will coach you. You just have to clearly define what good looks like, what success looks like, what's the outcome that you're driving towards. So these become more than tools, they become collaborators. And so the short answer to your question is I use many different tools. And if you ask me this question next week, the answer will probably be a little bit different. Uh,
It's
but
evolving so fast.
yeah, and the more fundamental answer that I would give you is it matters way more how you collaborate with
Mm,
these tools
okay.
and how you bring them into your world.
Okay. And that's completely fair because it is rapidly changing.
Indeed.
I mean, 3 months ago I was using ChatGPT and now I haven't touched it since. And it's Claude mostly and Gemini,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that'll change again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Recently got into Perplexity Computer,
Oh, yes. Yes.
which is pretty cool out of the box, being able to set it up very quickly and
Yeah.
agentically with very little coding experience. So that was
Yes.
very cool.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll tell you one thing though, one tool that really impressed me, and it came out in November, and that was Open Claude or Claude whatever
yeah.
they
Did you
call
set up an instance of that?
I did, and here's what got me. I set up an instance of it, and great, it's a chat bot, and you can connect it to your data and all of those things, right? The same thing that lives on my desktop. But
Yeah.
I connected it to my WhatsApp.
Okay.
You can connect it to your
Yep.
WhatsApp or your
That's how you
Signal or your
control it, right?
iMessage, right? And that for me was transformational. In my hand, wherever I was, no matter what I was doing, I didn't have to be in front of my desktop. I didn't have to be in front of my computer. Wherever I was in the world, I could just text it. And I
Right.
can say, "Hey, could you pull up this email? Could you help me ideate what to do about this situation? Could you go away and research this and come back to me in an hour? Could you look up restaurants in this town? And I want something that's, somewhat healthy, but not too far away." And I would just treat it like a personal assistant on demand for both work tasks and personal tasks. And it was absolutely transformational having it where I was and being able to talk to it the way that I talk to people at
Yeah.
any time. Like sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd be lying awake texting it and coming up with ideas. And that to me was absolutely transformational. So I would encourage people, no matter what tool they play with, experiment with having it in your phone, experiment with having it
Yeah.
available to you where you are, wherever you make decisions. Wherever you need to ask questions, it may be on a building site, it may be in an office, it may be, you're out on a date and you've got a question about which restaurants to go to, or whatever the case may be, or you're having a friendly argument between friends. That experience of having the AI in your pocket when you need it, where you need it, in a format that's really easy for you to interact, I found really transformational to the
Mm.
point that I had to uninstall it because it was using it so much. Uh,
Yeah. I
and
get
so
that.
I would encourage people to kind of look out for that. I found that super valuable.
That's great. Great advice. So you started earlier saying, you started writing about this more on LinkedIn. I saw you on LinkedIn. That's why I asked you on the show. The has being more public and learning in public and documenting this and writing more, has that helped your career already?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think there's a couple of things um, that I'll say about this. It absolutely has changed the trajectory of my career. I think writing publicly, first of all, has forced me to kind of figure out what I actually believe versus what I think sounds good. And
Oh,
there's
yeah,
huge difference between that, right? When
completely.
thousands of people are reading something that you wrote, you find out very quickly whether your ideas are gonna hold up in practice. And I
Mhm.
think that discipline has really made me sharper at my actual job. It's really kind of expanded my productivity and my efficiency. And hopefully, I think also my reputation, right,
Yeah.
as well. And I want to come back to that in a minute. Um, I touched on something that I wrote earlier called a permission slip. And that's something that has really taught me something fundamental. It started with a friend. She was a product manager, and she told me that she'd shipped a strategy document that a VP had called the best work she'd ever done. And she was feeling so guilty about it because people were
Mhm.
quoting it in meetings and her management team was holding it up as really career defining stuff. And she said, AI helped me write it. Not the ideas. The ideas were mine, but the structure and the clarity, like it really helped me close the gap between what was in my mind and what I was able to express. And I felt
Yeah.
like a bit of a fraud. And that conversation really kind of broke something open for me because once I started listening for it, I was hearing the same problem everywhere. There are two groups in every company right now, and they're both feeling a little bit embarrassed about AI. Right?
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
There's one group that's using AI and they're using it to produce the best work of their careers, and they're doing amazing things, but they feel like they're cheating inside. And there's another group that are watching their colleagues race ahead, and they feel like it's a bit too late to start without admitting that they should have started sooner. So
Mhm.
there's two groups, and I'm finding them in every single company that they're a little bit ashamed, and they're both kind of performing confidence, but they're carrying it alone. So I wrote about it and I named it, and the response to that has been overwhelming because it turns out that there's so many people who are feeling the same thing, and nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
And so, when I write, I started building frameworks for how people should respond, how people should address particular situations. And that article was no exception. I produced a framework there, and it's definitely kind of helped me redefine my career. And I'm seeing people kind of ask about this as well on a day to day basis. So it's something I use in almost every workshop, right? I tell people without your expertise, AI produces what I call plausible mediocrity. It sounds polished and confident, and it produces things that reads well, but it often misses the point. And I think you touched on this earlier when you
That's right.
started
Yeah.
describing your early experiences, right? And only it's something that only somebody with real experience would catch. But AI with your expertise is extraordinary. And so
That's
this
right.
is one of the example of I'm seeing, writing about AI and writing about people's experiences with AI. And I'm really kind of learning in public. But that learning in public builds trust. This podcast is called Return on Reputation. And I think reputation is how people learn to trust the judgment. And I think by learning in public and building these frameworks and taking them to people and helping them clarify what they're seeing in their own world, and giving them a framework for addressing that and handling that kind of expands your reputation. It's kind of your reputation is what speaks for you when you're not in the room there. And that
Mhm.
helped my career. So that's a really long-winded
No, I love that answer.
answer to your question. The short answer is yes, absolutely. Writing about leadership helped my career, but that's the actual mechanism that I've seen actually take off there. It's the learning in public, helping put structure around the experiences that people are
Mhm.
having, giving people a language and a terminology and a framework for handling these kinds of situations. And that has a direct correlation on the trust that you build, which builds reputation, which then builds
Yes.
career influence.
And you're not alone in doing it. We had another guest on this. I had another guest on the show, Andrew Nash, and he's an incredible investor in his what he calls his third career. And he's now chosen to write more on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
building in public. And I think that the two are very equatable, maybe equivalent. But it's I love that, and I think it's so reputation. You're right, is what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's the same as brand. You can which I'm a big brand person, and part of the reason why we do what we do for executives in B2B companies. So it's really important. So I love that, and I think there's a human element that you've said in so many different ways that is becoming more important. So, and I want to respect your time. So we could probably talk. I could talk to you literally for hours about this. So maybe we can come back and do another
Of
show
course,
again.
of
But
course.
we'll transition right into the rapid fire. I do this with every person. Quick answers. You can even pass if you would like.
Okay.
So we'll start with so I don't know if you were on Twitter or not. What's your
Yeah.
what is your favorite social media platform right now that you're writing on?
LinkedIn.
Okay.
Um, I experimented with Twitter. I experimented with a few others. I use Facebook just personally, but LinkedIn. I think Twitter is, if you want to be clever, Twitter's the platform. If you want to be useful, it's LinkedIn. And I think being useful compounds. So, for me.
Yes, I agree. Most overrated advice about AI in the enterprise today.
Most overrated advice is just start using it. That's what I hear a lot from AI vendors. It's a bit like telling somebody who's never cooked, just start cooking. And what happens? You'll burn through ingredients and you just end up creating a mess and ordering pizza, right? And so, I tell everybody start with the problem, not the tool. Start with what you're trying to accomplish, not the technology, and work backwards from there.
Okay. One tool or habit you couldn't operate without right now.
Um, That's a great one. So I'll tell you, it's both a tool and a habit. Is that daily research agent that I described?
Okay. Yeah.
It reads everything I do. It only interrupts me when it matters, but it's like a research assistant with amazing judgment, and it's really kind of expanded my horizons dramatically.
And did you build that on OpenClaw, or is that running on Claude Code right now, or
I built
just
this on
technical?
Amazon Kiro, but honestly,
Okay.
you can build it on any tool. I just said, "Hey, create any research agent that reads my notes and what I talk about and what I write
Amazing.
about, and just go surface things that may be interesting to me."
Okay.
And that was it, really. Just a couple of sentences, and it's been phenomenal.
Okay. Okay. If you had to start from scratch right now, everyone listening who's feeling behind on AI,
Yeah.
what's the first step?
If you had to start from scratch,
What tool do they grab, or how do they jump into this today?
yeah, I would say I would say 3 things. First of all, learn from others like you. If you want to use AI professionally, if you want to
Mhm.
use it personally, find people who are already ahead because they've already seen what works and what doesn't work. And it's surprisingly easy to find these people. Just go to YouTube. I do a lot of my learning on YouTube, for example.
Okay.
People who are software developers, people who are not engineers, people who are in marketing plus AI, right? And then I see a lot of information there. And there's obviously a lot of people trying to sell you things, but there are people who just want to share. So start with finding communities of people like you who are further ahead of your journey. You may find them in your workplace, you may find them in your social circle. Two, find a tool that is free that you can experiment with, that you can put where you are and where you spend a lot of your time. It may be on your phone, it may be on your laptop, it may be on your office machine, security permissions, enterprise policies permitting.
Yeah.
Um, find a tool that meets you where you are. It may just be a chatbot. It may be something that's inside your Outlook, right? It may something maybe something that you can just text through, iMessage or whatever the case may be. But find a tool that meets you where you are.
Okay.
Uh, Three, learn how to collaborate with AI. When we first, with the advent of generative AI, people didn't really know, I felt, how to use AI. We would use AI for little, gimmicky things. Write me a funny limerick,
Yeah.
create a recipe for me. Push the boundaries on what you ask AI to do. It's incredible now what AI can do. But what I've always found is that AI is overly confident. So push back, spar, be annoying, question it, understand the limits of what AI can and can't do.
Hmm.
You can almost take any tool today, and they'll all perform really well. But where the rubber meets the road, where the real difference is how you collaborate with those tools. I find the people who have more two-way communication with the AI tool or agent are the people who race ahead in terms of learning, productivity, efficiency, and becoming more successful at the things that are meaningful and important to them.
Absolutely. I am. Yeah. How many times have you said, actually, that's not correct? And it's, oh, you're absolutely great catch, Mamoon. Mamoon, thank you so much for being on the show. It's
Yeah,
a pleasure having you on Return on Reputation. Again, we'll have to have you back. We could have had 2 hour, 3 hour show here. So thank you for the time. I genuinely appreciate it.
Justin,
Thank
it's
you.
been an absolute delight. Thank you.